Bruce Lee was an undeniably charismatic figure, fiercely talented and capable of performing superhuman stunts so incredible that no one would believe them if they were not recorded. Join us as we take you deep into the story of one man who blurred the line between make-believe and reality, starting with one of his most fascinating feats, the one-inch punch. The one-inch punch was one of his most legendary stunts. In movies, my job is to present the original Asian fusion, and Bruce Lee is the man who bridged the gap to American culture with a popularity few could have predicted. The arena was packed to the brim, everyone watching and waiting for the first attack. Standing on the mat a few meters from the barriers was the legendary Bruce Lee, his sparring partner, and several martial arts students whose eyes were filled with the same longing as the crowd. Lee, standing mere inches from his sparring partner, studied the scene like a true master. He knew exactly what to do to make the crowd go wild. The chair on the stage was proof that he'd done this before and definitely didn't want to hurt the sparring partner. Then, at just the right moment, he pushed out his fist, and down went the other guy straight into the chair that had been perfectly placed to catch his fall. That was the one-inch punch, and yes, it's exactly what the name sounds like. Imagine standing just 1 inch away from your opponent and delivering a strike so powerful it could knock him clean off the ground. It wasn't about raw power, muscle mass, or the physical difference between Lee and his opponent. This was a skill that only a true martial artist could master, just like Lee did, and every fan who has walked the same path of knowledge and discipline he did. The move is so incredible that if it wasn't recorded, no one would believe it. But the big question is, how did he do it? Well, here's the secret. Unlike other powerful fight moves that require raw power, the one-inch punch is actually more about what goes on in the brain than physical strength. For Bruce Lee, the idea was to travel a tiny distance in mere milliseconds, so it's not just the arms moving but his entire body. Jessica Rose, a biomechanical researcher at Stanford University, has studied this move extensively. According to her analysis, Lee's lightning-fast move actually starts with his legs. In this incredible footage, you can see his leading and trailing legs straighten with a rapid, explosive knee extension. The momentum then goes straight into his hips, then his shoulder, and finally thrusts his arm forward. Everything happens so fast that it literally makes Lee look like a superhuman. Apart from the fact that Bruce Lee is probably the most impressive martial artist to ever live, this particular strike is really high-level and hard to replicate. On the surface, it looks like a simple strike that shouldn't really have the kind of effect it does. But once the one-inch punch makes contact with the target's body, it combines the power of some of the biggest muscles in his body into a tiny area of the opponent's body. The idea isn't to strike a large surface area but to deliver a powerful punch from a tiny distance into a tiny part of the body. But if you thought the one-inch punch was impressive, you should see the actual clip of Bruce Lee doing his infamous two-finger push-ups. The two-finger push-ups are another marvel. 1,500, that's the number of push-ups Bruce Lee could do at a stretch without breaking. But what's more impressive than doing an insane amount of push-ups? Probably placing his entire body weight on just 2 fingers non-stop 200 times in a row. While most people would struggle to complete 10 push-ups before breaking down, the legendary Bruce Lee proved he possessed superhuman abilities with his two-finger push-ups. Not surprisingly, his record remains unbroken till today, and yes, it's an actual record certified by the Guinness Book of World Records. Not that several people haven't tried to break it. Ali Valazade Kajbaf Shahi, an Iranian martial artist, currently holds the record for the most two-finger press-ups done in 1 minute. But even though he managed to do 74 within 60 seconds, he still couldn't beat Bruce Lee's record. Earlier, in 1991, Paul Lynch from the UK broke the Guinness World Record for the most consecutive one-finger push-ups, grinding out 124 before giving up. Obviously, that wasn't the same category, but even with that in mind, it still doesn't beat Bruce Lee's record. Safe to say, Lee was a once-in-a-lifetime athlete with superhuman abilities that may never be replicated in any other human. And that's not just his fans glorifying him. Even Joe Weider, famously known as the father of bodybuilding, described Bruce Lee's physique as one of the most defined he had ever seen. But that's not the only push-up record he held in his lifetime. As the story goes, Bruce Lee could do 400 push-ups with one hand as well. But was it all just for show-off, or did the push-ups help improve his fighting abilities? Well, the truth is, Bruce Lee's two-finger push-up routine was actually part of his personal martial art philosophy known as Jeet Kune Do. As a master martial artist, he combined a wide variety of other fighting techniques, including Tai Chi, Wing Chun, street fighting, and even boxing. The first time he ever demonstrated this incredible stunt was at the Long Beach International Karate Championships in 1964, wowing the crowd and cementing his legacy as one of the best to ever do it. But if his two-finger push-ups don't impress you, how about the actual records of his real-life fights? The real fight on record is a topic of much fascination. From his brutal fight against Chuck Norris in the Roman Coliseum to his 1 vs. 10 in Fist of Fury, Bruce Lee really has some of the most iconic fight scenes on television. But there's one question that remains unanswered. Did he actually fight in real life? The short answer is yes. However, the bad news is that most of his fights were not recorded on camera, as he preferred to fight in secret. As for the good news, we actually have real footage of a Bruce Lee fight filmed during the 1967 Long Beach International Karate Championships in California. Here, you can see Lee facing off against a few of his top students. So while this was an actual sparring session, Lee was definitely not trying to end his opponent like in the movies. This might explain why his moves aren't lightning fast like you'd naturally see in his movies, and why his strikes don't land as heavily as you'd expect them to. Also, thanks to California law, the fight had to be done in sparring gear. And in case you haven't figured it out yet, Bruce Lee's the one marked with white cords. Throughout the fight, you can see him keeping an effortless distance from his opponent while ducking and dodging every shot sent his way. Standing like a trained killer before his opponent, Lee quietly studies his every move, and from the clip, it looks like he knows what his opponent would do before he does. As for his attacks, Lee had these quick and concise movements that seem to meet their mark every single time. Imagine a fighter throwing and landing every punch and every kick during a fight. It almost sounds practically impossible, but then it's Bruce Lee, so that makes sense. While the student desperately lashed out when he thought he saw an opening, it turns out Lee was only baiting him and would immediately launch a counterattack that left the opponent almost severely injured. Judging by Lee's fighting style in this footage, it's safe to conclude that he may actually be more calm and calculated than he appears in his movies. His style was also distinctly different from every other martial artist of his time because instead of focusing on a single martial arts style, he learned to mix multiple styles to create a lethal combination that no one has ever been able to replicate. But this wasn't just for his movies alone, as he also utilized these skills in actual real-life combat. Bruce Lee vs. Wong Jackman is a famous tale. When the official karate magazine published its July 1980 edition, one story stood out above every other. The article, told by the famous martial artist Wong Jackman, follows a real-life account of a fight between Wong and martial art legend Bruce Lee. And if it wasn't actually documented, most people would have doubted its authenticity. Just like most of Lee's fights, the duel between him and Wong Jackman was fought in absolute secrecy. At a time when top fighters would prefer to display their skills in huge arenas before thousands of spectators, Bruce Lee chose to keep his major battles behind locked doors. But the stories couldn't remain hidden forever. This particular one takes us back to the winter of 1964. The setting was a small kung fu school in Oakland, California. At the center of the room was a 24-year-old martial artist weighing approximately 140 pounds with a 5 feet 7 inches frame. He wasn't really famous yet, but within a few years, this man would become the biggest martial star in all of history. His name was Bruce Lee. Right beside him on the stage was another fighter weighing 135 pounds, standing at 5 feet 10 inches. This fighter was slightly taller and, just like Lee, was also of Chinese descent. His name was Wong Jackman. In this fight, there were no rules, no referees, no safety equipment, and no record to tell us how the entire thing really went. The only source we truly have would be Bruce Lee's wife, Linda, who recalled that 13 people were present that day, including herself. In her book, Bruce Lee, The Man Only I Knew, Linda documented the fight as follows. To bring the beauty of his martial arts challenge, he's gone for first. Bruce Lee and Wong Jackman came out, bowed formally, and then began to fight. Wong adopted his Wing Chun style through a series of straight punches, but Lee was faster and his punches landed harder, so hard that Wong's men tried to stop the match just a few minutes after it started. But James Lee warned them to allow the duel to continue. Apparently, the attack became so intense at some points that Wong actually turned and ran. But Bruce soon caught up with him and, with one swift motion, brought him to the ground. Wong surrendered, and the fight was over shortly after it started. The victory was swift, depicting how incredibly powerful Bruce was. But according to Linda, it also pushed Lee to train harder so as to perfect his unique fighting style. Of course, this story has been disputed many times, especially by Wong himself, who claimed that he wasn't beaten to a pulp, didn't beg for his life, and definitely wasn't tackled to the ground. Unfortunately, the only person who can truly confirm or dispute this story died a couple of years after this fight took place. However, how do we talk about Bruce Lee's amazing skills without mentioning his favorite weapon of all time?